Here we go. Welcome to Go Bucks. Happy New Year to all of you. Matt, Happy New Year. Brian, Happy New Year. I'm sure you just got done seeing the Georgia versus Notre Dame game, and it's probably not super shocked, but still pretty surprising that Georgia went down to Notre Dame. And I think that, my gosh, based on like the thumbnail of our video, like the SEC seems to be going down in flames, and I love it. But anyway, how are you guys doing? Brian, start with you.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. It's obviously it's pretty tragic what happened in New Orleans to push this game to today, but it was kind of cool being able to watch another game. To obviously we had the game on New Year's Eve, and then the two yesterday, and then fourth one today. All the games had interesting storylines in them, and the game today I wouldn't say was overly exciting, but it's fascinating, like you said, to watch the SEC and to see the sea change that we've seen in the sport, quite frankly, since the NIL has come. I think it's changed the landscape. It's changed the power dynamics of the sport, and it's wild to me that the only SEC team left is brand new to the conference, and it's really the only SEC school that can compete in the economic arms race with the schools in the North. It's crazy. So, but yeah, things are good, man. I'm doing well. Excited to be here.
Well, I would say the North, and then Oregon and potentially USC if they get there.
I count them as anything other than the literally the southeast of this. The SEC for the longest time.
So the interesting question about that is going to be who in the SEC is going to survive long term. I mean, I was talking with one of my dad's friends who's a big Texas guy, and I was saying how A&M should be right there with everyone else in the arms race because they have so much money. But he was just saying how they always have a lot of money, or they don't spend it well, and they haven't done well with coaching. I mean, I thought Elko was a good hire, but didn't do great this year. I mean, not terrible, but definitely didn't win anything consequential, especially with all the money they're spending. So he just says it's how A&M is. If they could ever get their act together, they'd be dangerous because they definitely have the money. It just seems like it's just the Texas, and then Ohio State, Notre Dame, Oregon, Michigan, and Tennessee spends a lot of money. I don't think they're quite up to par with everyone else yet, but I really wonder if Alabama and Georgia are going to be able to keep up with everyone else, and the rest of the SEC for that matter, because it seemed like they've been dominating for so long, and the only thing that changed was NIL. I mean, that's the only it's Saban retiring. But NIL,
that was a big deal. But I think Saban didn't want to screw around with this.
Yeah,
with this stuff, and it is interesting to me that the when you saw, all we heard was the $20 million that Ohio State spent on their roster, but there were teams that spent more than them, and one team that was just below them or right in the same range was LSU.
Yeah.
So you talk about the team that underachieved the most this year based on on the spend.
LSU they have better talent in their backyard than almost anyone.
Yeah.
Well, hey, listen to this though. I mean, they've always so this is the tinfoil hat thing, right? The South has always spent a lot more than the North. Now the North is actually just spending more, like the Big Ten. They're just not, like, everyone is cheating now essentially with NIL. So it's created parity. Now all of a sudden the SEC is not doing as well now that Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, they're all spending money on players. The SEC has always spent money on players because they were cheating generally, right?
They weren't spending $20 million.
Not that much, tell you that. But to a kid back then, when they weren't getting anything from Ohio State or Michigan or Penn State, getting $20,000 or $100,000, that was definitely enough to sway them.
Cam Newton got $250,000 funneled through a church to his uncle. So, I mean, they were paying more than $20,000.
It didn't take long for the South to kind of just become not mediocre, but for the North to kind of catch up to them.
Yeah, Johnny Manziel admitted Manziel admitted on multiple interviews, including, even after the Netflix special, which admitted some of it, but he had some interviews recently in the last few weeks where he was, talking about even more money that was involved. So, I mean, the Ohio State, I think, didn't they get in trouble for? I think that there was like some McDonald's bags with a couple $100 or something. And I mean, we're talking about a couple $100 and then the tattoo scandal, right?
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever heard of anything more than that. Potentially car rentals or leases.
Well, and we had Harbaugh getting in trouble for
Yeah.
the cheeseburger gate or whatever that was, that whole deal the
Yeah.
first time. But it's not on the same level as the before, when they were doing duffel bags full of cash. Now you're doing multi-year, multi-million-dollar deals with these athletes. It's crazy. It's just a different level. You're talking
Yeah.
about going up against Fortune 500 companies doing this now, not Billy Bob's car dealership.
Yeah.
Not that car dealerships aren't part of that, but that's not the only thing. That's you're really on a different level when you're constructing a $20 million roster, and that's just roster retention.
Yeah, and $20 million seemed like a lot of money, like 6 months ago, right?
But think about it when you got 100, you got basically, let's just say average that a big time college program, Division I college football program in the Big Ten, or any big conference, is going to have probably 100 kids, including walk-ons and everybody else. So you spread that money over the entire roster, it's not that much. Now, of course, your walk-on linebacker is not going to be making the same amount as your quarterback, but the point is still the same. It's almost like you're seeing when all the schools that are at the top. I mean, basically the teams, I think, outside of Oregon and LSU, the teams that spent the most money on roster retention are still in the field for this college championship. I don't think that is certainly not the only story, but it's certainly part of the story.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. The other interesting thing was the fact that all 4 teams that got buys lost.
I agree with that, but I mean, but think about it. Two of them were Boise State and Arizona State, which were,
well, Arizona State should have won. Like, I don't know.
No. I'm not even getting into that whole thing.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, if you had seeded this thing by ranking,
the seeding was definitely screwed up.
They would have been like the 10th and 11th ranked teams in this field, right? Maybe 11th and 12th. Like, you wouldn't have gotten an automatic bye. So throw that right out the window. And then we all knew that Georgia, the SEC was down across the board. I mean, Georgia was not the traditional Georgia we've become accustomed to this year, and they beat Texas twice.
Yeah.
So, and Texas is still in it. So what does that tell you?
With their backup quarterback for the second one.
Yeah. And so Notre Dame, they really just got out Georgia'd in their own with their own style of play by Notre Dame.
That was hilarious.
And then we all knew that the Oregon Ohio State game was just a fluke of the seeding. But anybody with eyeballs knew that the most dangerous team potentially in the field was going to be Ohio State, just based on their sheer talent. It didn't mean that they were going to play up to that level because they hadn't done it all year, but clearly in the first 2 rounds, they've shown what they're capable of. But that said, all these people saying, oh, the layoff, Ohio State had a 2-week layoff before they played Tennessee. Everybody who played in the first round, basically had a 2-week layoff. I don't buy that crap at all. Like, get your team ready, and that's what, I love Dan Lanning's comments after the Rose Bowl. He didn't make any excuses. He just said we just weren't ready, and they had a better game plan. We didn't. They executed. There's no excuse.
Dan Lanning seemed unbelievably ill prepared to deal with anything that we did, though. I mean, it looked like they hadn't even practiced. Like, well, every single thing that we did was just like wide open, or just, I mean, some of it was free catches by Emeka and JJ. I mean, there were some free catches there too, but I mean, there was some wide open plays. Like the first touchdown was kind of ridiculous, and then the other one where he was on a safety and he just turned him completely out of sorts and was wide open. So I don't know. Like, it just seemed like they were, in the first play of the game, getting Gee Scott that wide open. Just like everything they were doing was just, lots of wide open stuff.
Well, I've said several times. Here recently, it's shown that Ohio State is a more dangerous team because of the losses, because of the lessons they learned from the first Oregon loss. The defense is totally different
Yeah.
in the way that they're playing since the Oregon loss, and the offense is playing completely different since the Michigan loss. And I do give a lot of credit to Oregon and Michigan for exposing some weaknesses, and they had to come back and respond to it. And I do like, Ryan Day, when he's coaching with his back against the wall, is a different dude. And he had that whole, their offense is, the offense in particular is playing significantly more aggressively than they were earlier in the year. To come out and run a screen and go on the very first play of the game, and every time they've been in plus territory in the last two games, Jeremiah Smith is a threat for them to throw a fade ball to Jeremiah Smith. And you're getting explosives out of the run game and the pass game in both of these games, and the defense is playing lights out. So it's you talk about peaking at the right time, but it's just crazy. This is exactly what we talked about when we talked about what was going to happen with an expanded playoff. When all the small schools wanted an opportunity, great, that's awesome. Guess what? Ohio State's probably going to win the national title this year, and they wouldn't have even been in it in any other year.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. So what do you think it is? I was watching Ohio State play, and I was kind of shocked at how one-sided it was, like everyone, I think. But what did they fix the most, do you think? Because I think it's probably two things. First, probably the offensive line. And then just like you said, Day playing with his back against the wall and just kind of coming out with a different attitude. I think a lot of it has to be that offensive line, right? Because against Michigan, they were a wreck. And they figured something out over the break, right before Tennessee played. Because Will Howard was not back there, not even being threatened at all. Not like he was against Michigan. That makes a huge, huge difference in them being able
Well, I don't know. He had some guys in his face when he made some of those, like that touchdown to Emeka. He had a guy right in his face when he threw that.
Yeah, he got away from some pressure too. He's been really hard to sack. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Roethlisberger in that he's a hard dude to get down on the ground. But
yeah, but the pressure rate was really low compared.
No, there's no doubt. They've had their way. And look, you got to give a lot of credit to Donovan Jackson going from left guard to left tackle. He solidified that position. It certainly helped that Carson Hintzman was the starter at center all year last year, to be able to slide in from guard to center and solidify that position. And I think the one big thing that you've seen from a personnel standpoint from the Michigan game is you're seeing less and less of Tegra Shabola and more of Luke Montgomery and Austin Sierraveld playing the guard positions. And they said after the Michigan game they were going to start rotating the guards more, and they've done it. I maintain that with what I've seen the last two games, the best lineup that they have is Luke Montgomery at left guard and Sierraveld at right guard. But
did you see how many snaps Tegra had in the last game by chance?
I didn't catch the snap count. No.
Yeah, I was kind of curious. No, I was asking if you knew. I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't happen to see it, but I know in most of every time I looked up, it seemed like, not to say that he's been, terrible, but he's certainly been a liability in pass protection in particular.
Yeah.
And the other thing that they've done is they're playing a lot more two tight end sets, and the tight ends in general as a group have played significantly better. The other thing I saw yesterday that I can't remember seeing this much of is Brandon Ennis. He's basically the fourth wide receiver. He played a ton, especially in the second half, and he was blocking his ass off. Like the receivers were blocking, just in general. I think they've done a lot of things scheme wise. They're not just trying to ram it right up the middle with inside zone. They're doing a lot of things on the perimeter. They're giving you a lot handy, and I think they're really the biggest change is they're using the threat of Jeremiah Smith to open up the run game. Because if you saw that first touchdown, and they ran the play two or three different times, including Travion Henderson's touchdown run was on the same play concept, where they were bringing Jeremiah Smith. He's tight to the formation, almost like a tight end, and he's slipping. It's not a jet motion because he's not coming in motion, but he's coming, below, between the offensive line and the quarterback across the formation. And that is such a threat. They had the Tennessee linebackers on skates. They had Oregon's linebackers and safeties on skates. I mean, it's a combination of a lot of things. But the other thing is I keep going back to is I think Will Howard played his worst game as a Buckeye against Michigan, and he has played lights out two straight games.
I think he had to have been concussed in that game. There's no other explanation for it.
No, not you can't say that. I'm not
Yes.
going to say that because he threw his
Yes.
first pick before he got hit. That first pick he threw.
Yeah, that first pick was terrible. Yeah,
he had one legitimate bad play, but he has one of those every single game, Nate. Even when he does.
He hasn't
in the last two games.
Michigan was pushing that offensive line back, like right from the middle, and it was making him uncomfortable the whole game.
He had an iffy pass against Oregon where he threw it into like he got pressured really bad. He threw it into a bunch of people and got lucky it wasn't picked. But he usually has one of those, but he hasn't had a pick. The one pick against Tennessee was borderline crazy. I mean, it shouldn't have counted because of the pass interference, but the pick itself was a borderline catch, and either way, it was an amazing play. So.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I like that comment, the chat comment there. The Big Ten has had a great bowl season. Michigan obviously beating Alabama, Illinois beating South Carolina. I mean, SEC is down bad. It's not just Georgia.
Yeah. The funny thing is Lane Kiffin is like rooting on all these SEC teams prior to their games, and they all keep losing.
Please root on Texas.
If Lane Kiffin, when does he play? When is this game?
They're playing right now. I think they're playing. They're playing.
They're big favorites, right?
Gator Bowl. Yeah, I mean they're playing Duke. They're up 24-7 already.
Oh damn.
Yeah, but they're playing Duke. Break.
Well, didn't their quarterback transfer already?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised.
Duke had that quarterback that they got from. He was the Texas's backup quarterback.
Was it Murphy? Was it Malik Murphy?
Yeah, Malik Murphy. So I know
he's not starting.
In the transfer portals.
Some dude named Bellin. I don't know. No idea.
So they're playing against some backups.
Yeah.
Three quarterbacks.
Yeah. And William, it looks like you're a Vol fan. The Volunteers are a good team. I thought they were a good team. I thought they just kind of had bad timing playing against Ohio State, coming out of that terrible loss against Michigan, and the fact that it was at Ohio State in an electric atmosphere. I think that really had a huge impact.
Especially with
no team's going to be ready for that. It's like the first time this has happened in the playoffs, where
especially the way that they're playing defense right now. The way they're playing defense, it's crazy.
Yeah, I'm more impressed with the defense even. I mean, because you always expect, we're going to get at least 30 points against most teams, and. I think the offensive line is doing better than we thought. And I think that, they're doing the running game the way that it should be done when you have a team like this where, we're struggling with traditional running. So we had to scheme it open by having a strong passing game to open up the running game, and like you were talking about with Jeremiah Smith being like the eye candy. And, everyone's just so worried about the passing game. And then, whoop, there's a 60-yard touchdown run that no one's even expecting. It's just crazy. But the defense is just so impressive. I mean, Oregon, they were without Stewart, but, we were without 2 first-round offensive linemen. Like we had an All-American center, All-American left tackle, both gone. And, we're cobbling together just random mixes and just throwing in people that have never played or played very little, have never started. And, it's a lot easier to replace a receiver generally than an offensive lineman. I mean, that's a really tough one because you really need, multiple games together to know how everyone's blocking, and you have to know the guys assigned next to you and everything else. So like it's a much, much bigger deal to replace an offensive lineman.
But I do think it was a big deal too that you've got to, as a coach, you've got to know what your guys' limitations are, and it's hard when you've got so many changes so late in the season, and that definitely hurt them going into the Indiana game. They didn't play particularly well, and then the Michigan game they played like crap. So it gave them a couple of extra weeks. There was some bad tape out there for that group, and they I think putting them in the best position to win, you got to give the coaches a lot of credit for that. It also helps that the way this defense has played since the Oregon game. I think I said on the last show. I believe I heard the stat They have not given up a passing touch there. They had until the Oregon game this time. They had not given up a passing touchdown since first since the first Oregon game.
Yeah, that was the
And
last time.
they have one of the things that they're doing is they are basing out of a too high shell, and they're basically playing Caleb Downs like a deep middle linebacker. And with Lathan Ransom being able to shoot the gaps and add a hat to the box in the run game, and Caleb Downs is an absolute eraser, they're able to stay back with a really light box and basically just dare you to run the ball. And neither Tennessee nor Oregon have been able to run the ball against them. And really, Michigan didn't.
Oregon was good at running against us the first time.
Yeah, but not the way they've made the adjustments. And say even the Michigan game, I think that defense got gassed late, but they had done a really good job of controlling Michigan's run game early in that, for three and a half quarters of that game. But this defense, the way they're playing, and now you're starting to get.
Well, they also didn't rotate against Michigan either.
And they've changed. Obviously, they're getting a lot more guys in the mix on the defensive line.
Rotation has been fantastic the last 2 games.
And the big thing I think that scheme is doing is, one, the corners are playing less man, so they're playing more off coverage with their eyes back towards the quarterback, and the linebackers are being able to play so much freer than they were before. And you can see it in how Cody Simon in this last game, and I thought Styles in the Tennessee game, are just able to trigger and cover their responsibilities. Like, you got to give a lot of credit to Jim Knowles and that staff for the scheme changes. I heard Egg Benosin get interviewed on the field last night, and he said somebody asked him about that, and he said the one thing is that they've just gotten simpler. Like, their scheme is just simpler. But I think part of that is because of the structure and the fact that Caleb Downs is such a dynamic, versatile player that he allows them to do that. And Lathan Ransom is those two guys together are the best safeties I can remember at Ohio State playing together.
Yeah, and that scheme, I think, really helps them against the teams that are out there. Because if you think about it, there are not very many teams that are stubborn. They're stubbornly running the ball like a Michigan, right? I think
Notre Dame, that's the only one.
Yeah, Notre Dame probably falls into that category because we just saw them do that to Georgia.
Yep.
And I heard the announcer. It drove me crazy. One of the announcers said, "Oh, now Notre Dame should take a shot," and I'm like, "No, don't take a shot. Keep running the ball. You're getting like 6 yards per carry on these drives." But I think that definitely bodes well for Ohio State and the defense that they're going to be playing. And Texas, they don't have a stubborn run game.
They have no run game.
Yeah, they
have no run game.
No teams have that kind of run game. They're all set up to be pass happy.
Well, the only one that is Notre Dame. So that's what it's. Styles make fights, and that Notre Dame Penn State game is fascinating because I don't think this sets up very well for Texas at all. I think it's shown that when you're one dimensional against Ohio State's defense, you are in big trouble. Big trouble.
Very true. Oh, hey, Brian, how's it going? OSU will win the Natty, but it will be one of the weakest in memory. That's definitely partly true, I would say. No great teams and had 2 losses, one to a bad team, Michigan with a quarterback that goes B2B. You know what? That is true to a certain degree. There are no dominant teams out there, but Ohio State definitely had the hardest road, I would say. So
definitely.
Hardest road in the playoffs against no really dominant teams, I would say.
I would say the difference though is it's probably you would have to check point spreads because you can do this statistically to see, for instance, it's about the same to face a team where you're a slight underdog. That would be about as hard as facing 2 teams that you're an 8-point favorite. So 8-point favorite is a pretty decent favorite, but having to do that twice is roughly the same as going up against one elite team that's maybe a little bit better than you.
Yeah.
So
I just don't
having to beat 4 teams is going to be really hard. Especially, Texas is still, their roster is loaded, even if they have weaknesses. And to be honest, my main concern with Texas is Ewers getting benched or either Arch coming in with some packages and running on us because he can run and pass, or Ewers getting benched and him coming in and lighting it up because, I mean, he's the real talent.
You know Steve Sarkisian's going to develop some sort of awesome package. You just know he will. And you're right.
If he's smart, he is. If he's smart, he is.
Tennessee, Oregon. Now you have to play Texas. You're right. I mean, that's a gauntlet. Even if they're not teams.
Yeah, even though there may not be a 2 or 3 super teams like we've seen in I don't know 5 years ago. If you go through what Tennessee was, I'm just looking at the last AP top 25. Tennessee was 7. You'd have to. Oregon was 1, and you're going to have to beat Texas is number 4. And you're going to have to beat either number 3 Notre Dame or number 5 Penn State. No one in the history of the sport has gone through a gauntlet like that at the end of the season.
Yeah,
none of them. So I don't want to hear it. And as an Ohio State fan, if they win, I don't. It doesn't matter. They won the title in the first NIL, in the first expanded playoff year. That's what would matter to me. But the biggest thing now, the biggest thing coming into the Oregon game is that really was a must win. That was a must win because there's no way that Ryan Day can have 2 daddy programs, in the same conference, because Michigan's beaten him 4 times now. And if he had lost 2 times in a row to Oregon, oh my God, like, I don't know how he maintains the leadership of that program going forward if they don't. And they didn't just answer the call. They beat the shit out of Oregon. They curb stomped them. They've curb stomped two really good opponents, and they are peaking at the right time, which makes the Michigan game and all that infuriating on the one hand. But again, I don't know that they're playing at this level had they not learned the lessons from losing those games.
Yeah, I would say that's been Ryan Day's biggest weakness as a head coach is he's very reactive. He doesn't make changes until he has a loss. So like you said, they made changes defensively after the Oregon loss, and then they made changes offensively after the Michigan loss. But
Agreed.
Yeah, and then defensive coordinator changes. Like we what did we bench Kerry Combs after losing to Oregon? Yeah,
that whole season.
It's just all reactive things. And then the other thing I was going to ask you, what are you going to do with the with Larry Johnson and with Fry at offensive line coach? So Fry is he's done a fantastic job fixing losing two stars and making a line that's good enough to get us this far. So, his recruiting is still an issue. So, I don't know.
Well, I think
what percentage of your job is recruiting? Most people would probably say 60%.
Well, but part of that, I think one of the issues has been there's been a couple issues I think with the recruiting, and this is just my opinion. I'm not based on
having a backup plan.
When you part of it is that they for the last couple of years they haven't taken, I think, enough Ohio kids when maybe they weren't 5-star kids or high 4 stars, but developmental kids from the area. The other one was that, and I think this is just a problem of the NIL era, is you kind of have two ways of doing it. You either spend your money to pay for prospects, or you're paying to retain the guys that are on your roster. And I think Ohio State's clearly said, look, we're not going to get into an arms race paying high school kids. I don't give a shit what your ranking is. And that's why they've lost out on some, especially the top tier offensive line prospects coming out of high school. I think the lesson that you learn though is go in the portal. I mean, Josh Simmons was a portal guy. McLaughlin was a portal guy. Michigan built a lot of their success getting guys in as transfers that were coming in with a lot of starts in other programs. I'm perfectly fine going out and getting tackles in the portal, and that's what they've done here. They have a significant weakness coming into next year, knowing that they're going to have to replace 2 starters, and they went out and got 2 really good ones in the portal. So if you're going to spend the money, again, when it comes to quarterback and your key offensive line positions, if my job were on the line, I'd be going in the portal. I would put more resources into the portal than I would into high school recruiting.
Yeah, those guys are definitely more proven. I agree. Brian, thanks for the 20. I'd rather play 4 mid to good teams than 1 elite team. What are you saying? Texas is mid, Tennessee is mid, Oregon is good, but not as good as last year. The Final Four is a team that lost to NIU, James Franklin, two lost teams. Yeah,
Sure.
it's crazy how this has worked out. Ohio State wouldn't even be in a 14 playoff. You guys have been left
Well,
out. Like
we would have
playing out.
been, but you can't like. I almost feel like those are like even last year or the last you go back 4 years, 5 years, whatever you want to go back. Those were the before times. We're now in a full blown NIL era and the expanded playoff era. It's a different ball game. It's just a completely different ball game. So, yeah, you're not playing probably, 2019 LSU is not in this field. What was it, 2020 Alabama's not in this field, but you can, it's just I think there's more parity in college football across the board because of the NIL than we've probably seen maybe ever. Um, and it's while there are no, and maybe we're seeing a down year on top of that. I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think coming into the season, people expected Georgia and Ohio State and Oregon to be in this thing just based off talent. Texas obviously had high expectations, um, but there's still some very talented rosters in the playoff. And to match point, Texas is still very dangerous because they're very talented. I've seen Penn State play live. Like they're talented. They played other than the start of the game, they played right with Oregon. Oregon's a really good football team. They're for where they are, they're still talented teams out there, but the ones I think we all agreed that there were only 4 or 5 teams that really had a legitimate shot to win this thing. And it's just the sort of the luck of the draw that some of those matchups you got in the quarterfinals instead of the semis or the championship game.
It is really hilarious, though, just mentioning that Notre Dame and James Franklin are both potential national champions.
Yeah, they're going to get one of those teams is going to get in. Well, Matt said it for a long time ago with that. The loser of the Big Ten championship game was really in a better position to get there than the winner.
Yeah. And you guys
by a long shot.
Like Joel Klatt was on earlier today, and he said something interesting. See if you guys agree with this. 2 things. First, that teams should be playing home games all the way through the playoffs, all the way through the playoffs, like the NFL. And then you have one big, massive bowl game like the Rose Bowl on January 1st. That is the national championship, and you make
that'll never happen.
Yeah. It's too good to be true.
Well, the bowl structure,
at least after 2026, when all the contracts go out for the bowls. But
yeah, I don't know. It is weird when you're playing like one bowl after the other. Like to play in the Rose Bowl and then go play in the Cotton Bowl is weird. But I just think logistically that would be problematic to keep playing at these universities like that late in the season. But the bowl structure is just so it's such a big part of the fabric of the game. I think you'd have a tough time, and the economic disentanglement would be very, very difficult.
Yeah, there's a contract through 2026, so they could think about doing that after 2026. I think someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that would have been awesome to have home games all the way through, just like they do in the NFL. And nobody cares that they have to play in Lambeau, later on in January. During the playoffs in the NFL. So I'm sure it's fine. That would have been awesome. I thought it was awesome that Ohio State had a home game with Tennessee. And it wouldn't have been great for Ohio State this year because you had to go to Oregon again, which wouldn't have been fantastic. But still, that atmosphere is just seems so much better than a bowl game.
I think you're gonna get so much better. I don't know. I'm just a fan of like playing. When you get this is not the NFL. So you're not playing, you're not used to playing games in Arrowhead in January. It's just, to me, I want to see these teams play in the best environment they can to play at their highest level. Like I'd have no problem with them playing in the traditional bowl venues. And I think that that's to me is so low on the hierarchy of things that this sport needs to get to improve. I mean, to me, I think can we get some consensus on what the hell a targeting call is? I mean, I'm talking about the low hanging fruit. Like, holy shit, you got games that are getting that Arizona State Texas game swung on really on a targeting call. I mean, it's like there are fundamental things that are, I think we need to have, well, like we talked about with I'm not sure if it was on air or off, but the idea of like more consistency of the officiating so that you don't have these um, different rules between the conferences. Like
Yeah,
having
that's
some kind of a college football czar. Like there are things to me that are way more important than where these playoff games are played. That's so low
Like
on the totem pole.
true, like getting the portal timing corrected
Oh,
because
that's awful.
it's
Just
just so
terrible.
unfair. I mean,
It's
you guys
ridiculous.
are playing games and the portal's open, and guys are making decisions without even Ohio State or a lot of the teams in the playoffs even being an option. You don't know who's leaving or who's not leaving. It's just
It's crazy.
it's preposterous.
Yeah, so that means like when a lot of people have already, for instance, made their decisions on where they're going to go, and then let's say you have a team like Ohio State and you make it to the finals, and then some people do better than they thought, and they potentially get more money, and they want to leave, and then there's now limited amounts of people that we can choose from because everyone else has already done that. It's already been,
Yeah. Or they've improved their draft stock.
The last game is on January 20th now.
Yeah, it's
That
just
is
so
far out.
yeah, it's so ridiculous.
I mean,
Yeah, I gotta ask you guys a question though. I gotta ask you because I asked this on the last video, and Matt blew me off a little bit when I mentioned it. But I've got to ask this because I think I could make a case that it could be a possibility. And if Ryan Day goes deep in the playoffs or wins the national title, is he a candidate for an NFL job when NFL jobs come open and they're coming and calling on him? What do you guys think? What is his jumping possibility? Because I tend to think it could be a possibility.
I felt like it's a possibility every year. I mean, it's just something whether he wants to do it or not. I think he'll always be in demand. I think he could go be an OC tomorrow if that's what he wanted to do. And I just genuinely think I don't think that he wants to leave. He could have already done it. He's already had the NFL calling, you know, at least if you listen to the rumors for several years. So he's still got connections there. And my sense of it is that he really does enjoy being the coach here and wants to win a title at Ohio State. But I wouldn't blame him if people are doxing his address and hassling his kids and shit over the Michigan stuff. Then yeah, but it's a personal decision. And we talked about this, I think, on the last show. His son's still playing high school football in the area in Columbus. I think at minimum it's going to be, I think he's got 2 more years left. RJ Day does. So I wouldn't expect anything to happen before RJ is ready to go to college. But these are human beings at the end of the day, and we're all passionate, but I mean, there is a line, and there are people who are going to cross it. So, when you got to have 24/7 security, for your family because people just are losing their minds. Yeah, that's taking it too far. There's passion and there's just taking it too far. So other than that, I don't think for professional reasons he's going to leave, because I think he's starting to get his legs under him. I think he's starting to figure out that Ohio State's in a pretty damn good position to be a perennial national championship contender in the NIL era. They just had to get some things sorted out. And, it is like to Matt, I think you said that perfectly, that it is frustrating. As much as I'm a Ryan Day guy, he is very reactionary. I mean, throughout his tenure at Ohio State, it always seems to be after something bad happens that we make the changes that are necessary. And that is a bit frustrating. So I'm very hopeful that this season does turn out the way that we all hope it does, and that at least the Ohio State fan base hopes it does. And that it doesn't, it seems like they're finally showing the potential that we all believed in, all season long coming into it. So as far as where the team is positioned and where it seems to be going, I think they're in a great position. And it's cool to me to hear like Dan Lanning talk about how much respect he has for Ryan Day, and you see how much the players love Ryan Day. When you see the post game stuff and how they love the guy. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think he's going anywhere. I hope he doesn't go anywhere. But if he does, I certainly couldn't blame him.
Yeah, I was thinking it would be a head coach, not OC. But after this year, I mean, Ohio State's losing a lot, right? And I was just thinking about like the timing of it. If he wins the national title, a lot of turnover is going to happen on the team. Not that Ohio State can't handle that or deal with it.
He's still got Jeremiah Smith, and he's still going to have a loaded team. He's still got Caleb Downs. Like they're not going to fall off.
Maybe Jeremiah is enough to keep him around.
I mean, quarterback positions, I think the biggest, if you're looking ahead, and I don't really want to look too far ahead, the most intriguing thing is the quarterback position by a long shot, because obviously Howard's gone, Devin Brown's gone. It looks like stay and fight it out with Julian Sand to see what they've got. It sounded like they're not going to go into the portal ahead of spring ball. So, and I, from what I've seen from Julian Sand and Keenels, I don't think either one of those guys are close to being ready to compete at this level. But, it's everything else. I mean, they're losing a lot of veteran guys, but they're loaded right behind there, Nate. I mean, that team, if you think they're going to have some massive fall off, I don't see it. I don't see it because there's still a ton of NFL talent waiting. And the biggest weakness that they had was the offensive line, and they've gone to the portal already and addressed that issue.
Yeah, I didn't think.
Do you agree, Matt?
Fall off, but there's definitely been a lot of senior leadership leaving. And if you were going to go, it would be after you lose a bunch of seniors and then after you win a national title. So I don't know. I just thought that was something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much depth everywhere. I mean, losing Ransom will suck, but we have so much depth in the secondary, and we keep recruiting 5-star after 5-star. I mean, we have like 3 levels of 5-stars. They're just like, there's just so many on the secondary. Like our secondary is just like 15 5-stars. It's just absurd. Like we've never had this kind of depth. And by the way, you were talking about like who had the best secondary safeties. I still think 2019 might be slightly better just because it depends on what you value. And Malik Hooker I've never seen anyone get interceptions like that dude. He was just an interception machine.
He was awesome. Yeah, Malik Hooker.
Out of anyone that I've ever seen in Ohio State, like he was.
I just don't know if they've had a tandem this good. I mean, both guys are so good. Lathan Ransom took James out of that game.
Yeah, no, I mean it's just different. It's a different type of player. Whether you're getting interceptions or you're getting stopping the run. I mean, the guys that we have right now Caleb had some really nice pass breakups. Usually he's the guy that's always making the tackle. And against Nebraska, he saved at least 2 touchdowns. In that game. So I mean, God, I was arguing with an Alabama fan and making fun of them for not making the playoffs and saying how NIL has killed the SEC, and he was basically just saying, well, if Caleb Downs stayed at Alabama, we'd probably beat Vanderbilt, and you guys probably lose to Nebraska. And I couldn't really argue with that because I just about every day or certainly every game, I'm thanking Nick Saban for retiring. Yeah. That was just think about how much we got from him. We got an All-American, we got the Remington Award winner at center who unfortunately got hurt. And then we got, the future quarterback who was ranked number 1 in the country in 2023. And then, of course, we get Caleb Downs. And none of that was happening if Saban didn't retire. It was just huge.
I'll take all that thanks. Michigan will take all that thanks for driving Saban out of the game with that 2023 win. So I'll just accept that thanks on behalf of Michigan. But by the way, I think Ohio State won't be nearly as good next year, and that's all right. I mean, they won't be like they are this year.
No, and I'm definitely not saying that. It's not like the cupboard's bare.
Yeah, Michigan's got Ohio State coming next year to the big house, and Ohio State will be. Who knows who their quarterback's going to be, but they're still going to have Jeremiah Smith. They're still going to have Caleb Downs, but both those guys, Jeremiah is 0-1 against Michigan. Caleb Downs is 0-2 on 2 different teams. We'll see what happens. I know those guys will be hungry, but Michigan.
What area would you even be concerned about at all besides quarterback? And I'm not even like super concerned, just because we know Saban is talented. I saw video of him recently, and he's bulked up quite a bit because that was the big concern for me. He was kind of small, so he looks like a normal quarterback size now. That he's not going to break in half, and obviously not having much experience is definitely a concern going into next year. But we don't have that hard of a schedule. I don't think.
No, I don't think you're not going to be concerned about any specific talent wise. It's just losing a lot of guys.
No, but I mean, we're going to lose JT Tuimoloau out, and we're going to lose
Sawyer. You're going to lose
Sawyer,
Tyreek Williams. You're going to lose Ty Hamilton.
Yeah,
I mean, you're losing all four. You're losing all four of your defensive line starters.
But all of our backups are equally talented. Almost.
I don't know about that. I mean,
the problem would be if the backups can get that close to the same level of play. The problem would be then their backups. So because right now, so it's just losing depth. Because we have a lot of proven depth right now, whereas it would be a lot of depth behind those guys.
I think there's no question in my mind that Tyreek Williams is the best defensive tackle on that team. And Hamilton's really good too. They're playing. All four of those guys are playing their best football of their entire careers right now. And the Oregon game may be the best collective game they've played together as Buckeyes. That is a big loss to lose four guys there. You're losing Cody Simon. I do think next year it'll be Styles and Arvell Reese will be your starting linebackers. I like Arvell Reese, but Cody Simon's been playing out of his mind, in the second half of the season. You are losing. They've rotated a lot of guys in the secondary. I'm not as worried about that, but the D line is definitely going to take the depth for sure. But it's time for Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, and those guys to step up.
And are we going to get anyone on the portal for the defensive line? Because
they've already gotten one kid. They've already gotten one. And it wouldn't surprise me if they're a little more aggressive, at least getting a big body to add to the interior defensive line. And I do think they're going to probably change the scheme. I do think you're going to see more of that 3-down lineman jack position. Probably if CJ Hicks doesn't, I have no inside information. If CJ Hicks stays, it will be because they're going to utilize that stand-up rush jack position more next year. Which suits him to be more of an edge rusher. He's not a linebacker. So I think they went in the portal and got a really good tight end. The tight end group as a whole all season wasn't great. I think they're playing much better now at this stage of the game. You'll have, I'd love to see at least one more interior offensive lineman potentially, but but your line, Hintzman is potentially back. So he's
having some snapping issues. It has me a little
he has been. That's why he's really more of a guard than a center. Yeah. But they're off. They're in the running backs. Obviously, it sounds. I guess Quinshon Judkins was still on the fence potentially about leaving, but Travion's gone. They did pick up the kid from West Virginia, who I think is going to be a good back for them. And they're always active. They always recruit well at that position. So wide receivers going to be loaded.
How important is it that we have two elite running backs instead of just one? Because Travion Henderson was always getting hurt, and it just in general, it's just so risky. Because you look at Penn State has two running backs, and then you look at Oregon. So what happened to Oregon? What happened to Tennessee? They had both of them had one elite running back. They both got hurt, and they're out of the playoffs.
Did you see that? Have you seen the statistical splits for Travion?
Identical. Their season and career numbers are identical. It's crazy.
It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. And it's cool because it's like one game, Quinshon will have 2 touchdowns. The next one, Travion has two touchdowns.
Yeah, it's just crazy how they just both complement each other perfectly.
And keeping Travion Henderson healthy for this run. I mean, you see how explosive he is in the open field. Good Lord.
Real quick, is Styles gone? Seeing that in the chat from Brian. Is he leaving?
No. I haven't heard any rumors he's going to go early. He's still got 1 year of eligibility left, and I would assume he'll stay. I mean, he's only been in the position 1 year. And linebackers, it's a difficult position. I would love to see. I think for his draft stock, he's a freak athlete. He would go. He's going to be in the NFL regardless, just because of his athleticism. But I think for his sake, he should stay 1 more year and really solidify his draft stock because he can be the leader of that unit next year.
Well, the NFL is probably going to move him to linebacker anyway. But Brian, thanks for the 5. Just mentioning like what we were talking about, I'd be concerned about every area pretty much. OSU will be young and unproven at almost every position.
Well, there were two that I wouldn't worry about.
At least
That
not every position, but
X receiver and safety. I think we're gonna be all right in those two positions.
Yeah,
Those two you can write those in pin.
Yeah, I mean, my gosh, you guys are going to go through not what's quite as bad as Michigan because you guys won't pull off that much. But yeah, there's going to be a pull off.
I mean, Harbaugh. What Harbaugh did, leaving the way that he did, and then toying with the NFL a couple years before that didn't help their recruiting at all. I mean, they had some stud dudes. I mean, Michigan's going to lose some big time guys to this draft too. It's not like Ohio State's the only team.
They might be losing 4 first rounders.
Yeah, I mean their top end talent was better in this draft class was better than Ohio State's.
Yeah.
But did you guys see the way that defensive line played against Alabama? And
in a hurricane,
tackles are getting thrown back. Dude, I'm excited about next year, even though we are losing Grant and Mason Graham. Like, we're getting some dudes up there, and I'm excited to see that. I was loving seeing those guys just push those offensive tackles for Alabama back.
All shit talking aside, like literally all banter aside, the development and coaching that the offensive line and defensive line groups have gotten in Michigan is unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, obviously they did a good job of talent acquisition, but man, oh man, they have pumped out some dudes, especially on the D line. It's been crazy.
Yeah, D line has been just like next year will be much easier when these 2 first rounders are gone and they replace them with 2 or 3 more first rounders. And it's been like that since 2021.
Yeah, they've done a great job. I mean, they've understood that you still, no matter what level of football you're playing, you win and lose football games at the line of scrimmage, and that's why Michigan's been competitive. And will continue to do so as long as they're good there. So it's fun, but I mean, the one thing when Harbaugh left with all the uncertainty and took the position coaches that he did, it put Michigan really behind the 8 ball in terms of recruiting for this year for certain. So, but I think the way that Michigan ended the season should help them quite a bit. They've got a little bit of momentum and it should put them in a pretty good position to be competitive. I mean, there's no way that any Michigan fan can say they didn't underachieve this year. Everyone expected them to be the 3rd or 4th best team in the Big Ten, but they ended the season beating Ohio State and beating Alabama doesn't hurt. So
they were a quarterback away. They were a quarterback away from beating Illinois and Washington, and then they would have 3 losses.
Yeah, maybe a receiver too, but definitely.
Well, I think that's the one thing that you can see clearly. Even like look at Georgia. Where would Georgia be if they had decent wide receivers this year? Oh my God!
Receivers just drop everything. It's like they led the nation, right, in drop passes.
And I get the banter that Ohio State, they're a flag football team because they've all the receivers that they've gotten, but they haven't done anything with it. But I think you're starting to see the impact. You have to have guys that can beat man coverage to really win, especially when you get into this era where you're going to have to play at least 3 playoff games. You're going to have to win your conference. You're going to have to win 4 big games to win the championship at the end of your season. That's just the reality for any team now. You can't just win 2. You got to win 4.
So I wanted to talk about the playoffs a little bit. And before Georgia lost, so my ideal playoff structure would have been beating Tennessee, beating Oregon, beating Texas, and then Georgia to go through all the SEC teams. But I would say Notre Dame would be a decent victory because at least they're a big brand name. But I really would have liked to beat Georgia, even with their backup quarterback. That would have been nice.
Yeah, very true. Totally.
I'll say I've learned my lesson. Because we all expected to beat Michigan and play Oregon in the Big Ten title game. I am not taking Texas for granted. So I'm not gonna say I want to beat Texas.
Texas is
Let's
basically the
call where it
national
may.
title game. I mean, Oregon was the first national title game. Texas is the best of what's left.
Well,
And after
my
that,
hope, my hope is it's Penn State, just because it makes my household so much more interesting, because my wife's a Penn State fan, but she
I just
also
don't
knows
like the rematches. I hate
James
rematches.
Franklin. I always joke around. She's always like, every time when we play Penn State, she's like, are you nervous? Because this year she's like, we're gonna get you, and I said no, because James Franklin's our secret weapon.
She
Every
has to
time.
realize that James Franklin is her secret weapon.
Oh, she can't stand him. She
Oh, wow.
can't stand him.
Oh, and
Because,
Brian,
you know,
thanks for the 5. Let me read that super chat real quick.
Oh yeah.
Second string defense looks elite. It only rained for 10 minutes, and the offense will be a mile better. That's so true. Like,
Yeah.
The offense, I can't wait for the offense for next year to be rid of the Davis Warren era. I mean, God love him for who he is. He's a great guy, and he really, I mean, they won despite him and because of him at the same time versus Ohio State.
So Nate, who do you think starts? Who starts at quarterback for you guys next year?
The guy, it'll be Bryce Underwood and the guy we just got from Fresno State, Mikey Keene.
Yeah, they said it was an open competition.
There's no way that freshman wins that. There's no way.
No,
I don't think he will either, but
There's
he
no
very
way.
will. He will at least play like JJ did when he was a freshman in 20.
That was smart. I thought that was actually really smart, and was one of the things that kept us from, one of the reasons that a guy like Quinn Ewers didn't stick around, because Ohio State doesn't do that. They don't mix in packages, for certain guys. But I do think if you're legitimately, like, they had the grab bag offense this year where they didn't have a quarterback, so they kept going to whoever they thought could do it. And I don't think that benefits, that's not in your best interest. That's actually one of the things I thought is, I've watched a decent amount of Penn State this year, and when their backup quarterback actually went in the portal, I thought that was actually better for their offense, because they kept bringing him in, and he was kind of their read option running quarterback. And then they would also go Wildcat with Warren back there. And it's like, you don't need that. Just let your starting quarterback. You got potentially the best quarterback in the Big Ten. Let him run your offense.
It does seem weird. Why doesn't Ryan Day do that? Like, play the quarterback. Just maybe the quarterback isn't good enough to do that. Maybe JJ was just really good. They saw that they needed to get him on the field, and he was going to play, and they did it. But
I think that's what it was.
like
I mean, clearly, because clearly the starter transferred that next year. So I mean, I think that was a great talent evaluation by Harbaugh's staff, and then they made the commitment to give him, give him a package, give him a few certain things that he could handle. But he handled his role well that first year, so he showed he could do it. Because really, I mean, there's so much more to playing quarterback than just being able to be, athletic and make plays. You've got to be able to be in control of the entire offense. That's hard.
true. Hey, Brian, thanks for the 2. Bryce Underwood is the greatest quarterback recruit since T-Law. I'll start. Yep, I think Bryce has a chance to maybe be the starter. I mean, if he's just lights out awesome, then yeah, you put him in there. I mean, I don't think that Sharon Moore would hesitate to put a guy in there like Bryce Underwood, who they're paying $12 million. I don't think that'll have anything to do with it. But if he's just really that guy, I think they'll give him a lot of playing time.
So why was he getting so much money when he wasn't even like the top rated quarterback in his class?
Bryce Underwood?
Yeah.
He's the number 1 overall recruit.
I thought there was a couple, depending on which rating it was. I mean, it wasn't like conclusive, was it? Like,
well, I think part of that was because that's what it took. That's what it took to pry him away from LSU. It's like anything else. Something's only as valuable as somebody's willing to pay. And when you get into an open bid situation like that, especially being a Michigan kid, I mean, he was from everything I had read and heard, he was signed, sealed, and delivered to LSU. And Michigan was
why would you want
later.
to throw to Michigan receivers when you could have easily win a Heisman with the LSU offense and those
I think they made him
receivers.
They made him an offer he couldn't refuse. I mean, it reminded me
been so much more because
it reminded me of Mark Fletcher. I mean, Mark Fletcher, wanted to play at Ohio State and ended up a last minute NIL deal that kept him in Miami, and it was a deal that it was it was a deal he couldn't say no to.
It
So
was
that's ultimately what it was.
that was it, and I'm sure they gave him excuse me, some guarantees that they would go get some receivers, and they have. They have gone out and gotten some receivers.
Yeah, they got that kid from, was it UConn, that tore it up in the bowl game?
Yeah,
Wasn't that the one that?
I'm trying to think of his
So
name. Yeah, they got an Indiana receiver. They're going after another guy. I can't remember his name, but yeah, they're bringing the guys in the portal, so they're not going to just. I mean, we got a couple good recruits,
which is smart. It's smart, and you see what you see the impact of bringing in guys that have played and had a bunch of college snaps. I mean, Indiana was good because they had veteran guys that came over when the coach did. Now, granted, there are levels of talent and size and speed and all that fun stuff. Eventually, you can't overcome all of it, but it certainly helps you to have some veteran guys rather than a bunch of guys that have no idea.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and Bryce
good
Underwood,
God.
he is top 3 highest quarterback recruit ever. I mean, he is one of the very top. Michigan got his guy. I think Ohio State finally got their guy. I mean, who's the guy? What's the guy's name that you guys got?
Tavian St. Clair. But they
Yeah.
had the crazy thing too is like
Like 1 and 2.
Ohio is pumping out quarterbacks, pumping them out. This year alone, they had Tavian St. Clair and Ryan Finley, Ryan Montgomery from Finley, Luke Montgomery's brother, and both guys wanted to go to Ohio State, but Ohio State only. Tavian St. Clair, I think the kid put on like 20 pounds between his junior and his senior year, and just came on the camp scene. It was just destroying everybody. Finley he's going to Georgia, so it's not like, and then they've had 2 kids. They've had Aller and Grunkenmeyer, are both on Penn State's roster. But they're doing an excellent job, and there's some really good private quarterback development coaches here in the area that are doing an amazing job.
What I was going to ask about the quarterback, Brian, was, so you always hear about like these deals, like with, Bryce Underwood and some of the other quarterbacks, but you never hear like what. So Ohio State gets Julian Sayin and Tavian St. Clair, and Julian Sayin was the #1 quarterback his year, and Tavian St. Clair is a top 3 quarterback from this year, and I haven't heard anything on how much either of those guys are getting.
Well, the difference is, and I'm really not I'm not trying to sound like a homer by saying this, but the track record, when you're going to a top program to play football, you're looking at the league, right? And so you're going to see, where am I going to get developed the most? And the track record that Ryan Day quarterbacks have, that have just guys that have been in the system. You look at, again, Kyle McCord just set the record for ACC passing yards. What Quinn Ewers had done, what Joe Burrow had done, what Dwayne Haskins had done, what he did for Justin Fields, what he did for CJ Stroud, what he's done for, Ryan Howard. Julian Sayin wasn't chasing the biggest payday. He was chasing the best path that he felt for development for the league. That's why he sought out Ohio State after.
Yeah, and he was like we were the runner-up to Alabama also. But I was just wondering. So I know because of the things we're paying less, but I'm wondering, like, how much less?
Well, I don't know. I mean, nobody knows exactly what the figures are, but you've got to figure a top tier quarterback prospect's got to be getting over $1 million in some form or fashion. You just don't know what those numbers are. I'm very skeptical. When we found out some of the details back when Quinn Ewers got that $1 million deal that he supposedly got for the endorsement deal, it was going to be over like 10 years or something. It was something, it was so prorated that you're not getting that. Like, you don't know you just don't know what's in the fine print. So even if it's what we heard, somebody was talking about a quarterback signing for like $8 million in the portal the other day, and I can't remember who the quarterback was, but I'm immediately like, my radar goes up immediately. I'm like, there's no way that guy's getting $8 million check. This isn't the NFL. You're getting.
So what you were saying though about like the Ohio State quarterback. So let's say they're getting at least $1 million. So you're saying we're paying $1 million to 2 different quarterbacks because we don't know who's going to start yet.
Oh, I'm sure they've got a certain resource allocation. It's like cap management. It's no different. So let's say you've got $20 million to play with over the roster. My guess is
each quarterback is getting $1 million.
Probably. you're probably getting $1 million. And then you're looking at the other like top tier guys. I mean, Jeremiah Smith is obviously going to get a boatload of money to stay.
He's
Caleb Downs
he's
going
probably
to
going to need to get a raise.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. I mean, you're going to have to. You don't think those guys are getting calls all the time? I mean, the rumor was that Marvin Harrison Jr. was getting calls from USC, and they were going to give him a couple $1 million to transfer.
All those guys got agents,
Yeah.
and those agents want to make more money every single year. They're
Absolutely.
just like.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's not going to help when all these draft people are saying that Jeremiah Smith would be the #1 pick this year as a freshman.
Yeah.
All he has to do is show that to people and be like, I want $5 million a year.
I keep saying
that kid, though.
I think he needs to go the Mike Williams, Maurice Claret route. I think he needs to challenge the NFL again.
It won't happen because if you listen to that kid, like you just don't. What's rare about him is he's got all the physical assets, but then his mentality and his desire to get coached is. He's the hardest worker. There's never been a true freshman get the Iron Buckeye since Urban Meyer and Mickey Marotti came to that program and set that whole thing up. There'd never been a true freshman that had won that award, and he won it this year. So he's like the hardest worker on the team, and he's a freshman. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like the leadership that kid has, and the leadership that Caleb Downs has. Like those guys.
Yeah, I mean, every interview I've seen of him,
man.
he's so dialed in. It's just like everything's like a business trip. He just wants to get better.
And I love that. They asked him, what do you say? Can anybody, what do they say? Can anybody cover you? Can anybody shut you down? He's like, no. That's so good.
And he wasn't even being cocky. He was just answering the question.
No, of course not. Yeah. Oh.
Like the NFL when those guys do that, they're smiling and they're like, oh, yeah, I don't think anyone can cover me. But they're like joke about it. Like he reminds me of like T.O. or Dion or whatever, because like when they say it, they're not playing around. They're like, yeah, no one can cover me or no one can get open against me. I mean, that's just a fact.
Well, he probably wouldn't go #1 overall in the draft. He'd go top 5 this year.
No, but there's multiple draft people have been saying #1.
Well,
because there's no elite quarterbacks this year. It's a weak.
He would be rated #1 in like all the ratings. The #1 guy, someone who needs a quarterback, probably take a quarterback.
Not this year. Weak quarterbacks.
For it to even be coming up is insane. Like the fact that like Dane Brugler has said a couple times that both JJ and Caleb Downs would be no doubt top 10, probably top 5 picks, and neither one of them are eligible for this draft.
Yeah,
they would be the highest. They're the highest rated, by far the top talent on Ohio State's roster, and neither one of them are draft eligible.
If you could pick any player in the country other than a quarterback to add to Ohio State's team for next year, who would it be?
Not a quarterback.
Not a quarterback. Make it interesting. I would pick Stewart on South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean that kid is unbelievable. I don't know that I have necessarily a player in mind, but I would love to see, like, if you saw the difference in the offensive line when they got an All-American caliber.
Yeah.
Like, to me, if you could get a center, a really, really good center, and add him to this team, like, that's definitely something they should be looking to do. The other one would be probably a really dominant 3-tech defensive tackle.
Yep.
Because I'm not sure they've got that on the roster right now, beyond Tyleek.
Yeah, I mean, we just haven't had like an elite, like Chase Young type guy in a while. So that's why I wanted Stewart. That guy's just
crazy. Tuimoloau got to 10 sacks. He's the first Ohio State defensive end to get double-digit sacks since Chase Young.
That's just sad.
Yeah,
that is pretty sad. Hey, I take it back. I think Jeremiah Smith would go #1 this year because it looks like the Patriots have the first pick.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't need a quarterback. They would absolutely take Jeremiah Smith. The Titans, who's their quarterback? I feel like they would probably take Jeremiah Smith #1 as well. Maybe. I think they would probably need to take a quarterback. The Patriots would definitely take him at #1. That's wild.
He's just special, man. He's just special. You saw it. I mean, he takes screen passes to the house. He can out jump you for fades. Like, he just does it all. He can block.
I mean, he keeps jumping up in triple coverage and just out jumping everybody in his hands. It's just absurd. Like, these catches.
He's stupid.
He's Terrell Owens for sure. All right, guys,
Yeah.
let's wrap it up here. I want to talk real quick and end this on the next games. So Ohio State.
Before you get to the next games, are we going to talk about how you guys both got the prediction wrong for the Ohio State Oregon game?
Yeah, but
Oh yeah, I'll eat my crow. I'll happily eat that crow. I was happy.
I mean, I want Ohio State to lose because I'm living in Ohio and I hang out with you guys. So
my biggest issue in that was I was literally, it's PTSD of
definitely.
day going into a shell in big games. I wanted to see. I said it. I wanted to see, Georgia Ryan Day, and we got him. Like, he's pissed off right now. He's fired up. He's got the whole team fired up. They're ready to go, and I love it.
Yeah.
And I don't, I just thought Tennessee wasn't really that good. And so I thought the 40 that they put up on them was a little fluky. But I mean, 34
we were just so
straight
dominant, though. Like, even against a bad team, it's hard to look that dominant.
Well, and what's crazy is, we've said from the beginning they've been the best third quarter team in the nation all year, but they hadn't really started all that well. 2 games in a row. The game is basically over in the first quarter.
Yeah, crazy.
Over. It's nuts.
They gotta beware of a letdown against Texas, though. That's the only thing. It's really
for sure
talented than Texas, but they just have to look out for the mental aspect of it right now. And because they've had to play 2 games that they've gotten up really high for emotionally, they've got to just beware of a letdown.
I just think Texas is in big trouble. Texas is in big trouble because they have not played that well, and they don't run the ball that well. Ewers has not been that great throwing the ball deep. They've got one good, really good receiver and a decent tight end. That's their offense. They have a solid defense. But again, who have they beaten this year? Their best win is Arizona State, a game that they could have easily lost. Lost that
game.
Gave
up 500 yards to them, by the way.
To them. And all of a sudden, if you can give up that amount of rushing yards, like Ohio State, yeah, okay. I mean, that Scattergood was unbelievable in that game. Yeah. But Ohio State brings 2 guys who can both hit home runs in the backfield. Like, I think this is not a good matchup for Texas at all. And I'm not even saying that as a homer. Like, I'm still always nervous as a fan, but just looking at it, like trying to analyze it, this is not a good matchup for Texas.
I would be
other than it's in Texas.
Ewers doesn't have at least 1, possibly 2 interceptions.
Yep. No, you hit it on the head. I think the less they play Arch Manning, the better it is for Ohio State.
Yep.
Ohio State
he can give them a threat.
Line. That was the biggest issue they had, I think, against Michigan, and they've figured that out. So I think that it definitely favors them. They just can't let themselves get down. It's a gauntlet, and they're going to have to go through it. And I think that's really their biggest challenge.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think focus is a huge part of that, and not letting the emotions catch up. I mean, these are kids after all. So, but they're a very veteran-led team. So I think they know what's at stake, and that's what these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get like that overconfident when you're playing Texas. I mean, Texas is a legitimate team.
Yeah, this isn't it. It would have it could have been slightly different if it was Arizona State.
This is not like it's not like we have to worry about them letting up against an Arizona State team. Like, I would have been more worried about playing them because that coach has like all sorts of trick plays, and it's just it would be harder when going in. We don't do as well when we're like big favorites, but when you have like the chip on your shoulder, and even though we're slight favorites, like 4.5, 5 points, it's just it's not going to be a let up type game against a good coach and a good quality team.
Maybe not. I mean, they've got a lot of positive press right now. The Buckeyes do.
I don't like that rat poison.
they got a lot of positive press, and Sark is going to have a plan for them for sure. I mean, they're not going to let. I don't think Texas is going to let the Ohio State do what Oregon and what Tennessee let them do. I don't think that's going to. I think it's going to be a better game. But of course, I'm wrong about Oregon. I thought that was going to be a good game. So.
Well, I mean, look, the reason why I was confident against Oregon this time around, even though they had their defensive lineman back that was injured, was because I saw that Penn State game. I was like, Penn State doesn't have this good of an offense to be doing what they're doing against Oregon. I was like, that Oregon defense looks a little sus.
Penn State ran for almost 300 yards against them.
It was crazy. Yeah, I was just like, this Oregon defense doesn't look that great.
And didn't even stick with the run. That was the crazy part.
Yeah.
So I agree. I mean, I thought there were plays to be made. The thing that worried me was just that, that they I didn't think
Defensively,
they
we
would
were
have that.
awkward.
Yeah, I didn't think that they were going to play that dominantly
No,
defensively. I
no,
mean, they
no one
just
did. There's no way you could have predicted that. I mean, the defense
it's
just did.
crazy, man. What
I mean,
what a
8 sacks
scheme.
is just absurd.
Well, and it was the crazy thing was 8 sacks and they barely blitzed him.
Yeah.
They barely blitzed him. And then the game was just out of hand. So
I mean,
Oregon's
it
not
seemed like a lot of that was coverage sacks and stuff just because they knew like they had to pass. So it's just.
it was. Well, they dropped back, once they got them off schedule. That's one of those offenses. It's crazy, especially like getting to watch them live was really cool because it just showed how, to me, like I got the sense that they're like a fast break, almost a basketball team. Like Gabriel was as much a point guard as anything. It's just balls out fast, tempo, run, pass, keep you off balance, move you side to side, mix plays up, and it was. Ohio State learned that lesson that they were going to take away the vertical shots and play coverage and make them grind drives. And with the combination of how effective the offense was, that game just got out of hand so fast that they had no run threat. And that's the thing with Texas, like they just don't run the ball. So the I don't know that it's going to be that, based on what we've seen the last 2 weeks. I'm not sure it's going to be that much better of a game than the first 2 weeks, other than it's basically a home game for Texas. But I do think that both Penn State and Notre Dame can run the ball and at least stay balanced.
Well, Penn State's running back got hurt. I'm sorry, the Penn State's defensive end Abdul Carter got hurt, and then
Carter got hurt,
and then Notre Dame's running back got hurt.
Yeah, and so it's big. It's really, really big. It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. I mean, depth is going to get tested, and if Abdul Carter is, you cannot underestimate Abdul Carter's importance to Penn State's defense.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think Notre Dame or Notre Dame lost a defensive lineman before this game too.
Yeah, and they had another one go down during the game, like late in the game. Yeah, and so their best safety was kind of nicked up too.
Yeah, I just don't think that Notre Dame and Penn State have recruited enough depth to withstand any kind of injuries like this.
I do think that both offensive lines are good, though. Both offensive lines are good. Notre Dame's in particular, they've got a really, really good offensive line. They might have the best offensive line left in the playoffs.
Yeah, so I would be worried about stopping that stupid quarterback run because we've always had problems with that, it seems like.
Yeah, Leonard's a pretty good player.
And let Notre Dame run a kickoff return back, then you're probably going to beat them. Because I don't think Notre Dame even drove the field for a touchdown against Georgia.
No, didn't Georgia outgain them in that game? It's crazy.
Yeah, they may have. I haven't looked at the stats. I just know that
for a while they were.
You move the ball like
it's just hard to watch such bad offensive football after watching Ohio State play for 2 weeks.
That first half, if not for that turnover deep in their own end zone, deep in their own end.
That was also Kirby being a moron. He should have never done that. He put his quarterback in a bad spot with Toy. There's only 28 seconds left or something. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was dumb. It was so
maybe if you had a veteran quarterback and an elite offensive line and really good receivers, you do that. But with a suspect left tackle, a quarterback with his first start, no.
And Georgia always has a good defense, but they gave up. Notre Dame gained 244 total yards, 90 through the air. It's Georgia. I don't think you're beating. Yeah, I don't think you're holding. Again, unless Ohio State does what they did against Michigan and go, super conservative, I don't see how they're going to score less than 24.
They're not
or it's like turnovers in the red zone like they had.
Yeah,
they had multiple turnovers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's got to be red zone. I think Howard had his bad red zone game. It was against Michigan.
They're not going to have another Michigan turnout, Ohio State, because their offensive line has been fixed. That was probably, for me anyway, the biggest glaring issue Ohio State had. And then it was at the end when Ohio State let Michigan hold the ball for 13 minutes in the fourth quarter.
That was nuts, man. That whole end of that game was so crazy.
Yeah, it was a crazy game, and even if Ohio State still should have won somehow.
We even made a couple field goals.
Yeah, I was saying I was more impressed with the field goal makes than I was with Jeremiah Smith because I expect Jeremiah Smith to do those things. I don't expect our kicker to make a 46-yard field goal.
Oh yeah. Yep. Too funny. All right, guys. Well, let's wrap it up. Thanks to you guys. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Greatly appreciate it. We will have a lot of fun coming weeks watching the Final Four, and we'll have another show hopefully with you guys. We'll pick the scores.
Are we going to do a preview
Horns,
before the next game?
Say that again.
It's not till next Friday. We should be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But either way, down with the SEC. Horns down.
Yeah.
Horns
That's
down.
right.
No more SEC. And then let's see. I'd love to see an all Big Ten final. Let's bring it on, right?
Oh my gosh, that'd be awesome.
I mean, it seems like that's the most likely scenario at this point.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Totally is. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Take care and go blue.
Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.